You ever heard of a Wagyu Katsu Sando or a Wagyu Katsu sandwich? Like many things, there are several names I've heard thrown around, but we know the important thing. It's a sandwich with a nice full piece of Wagyu. And who doesn't love Wagyu beef? Now, let me quickly break this down for you. How exactly is it different from a regular steak sandwich, other than the fact, of course, that you're using Wagyu? The cool part about a Wagyu Katsu sandwich is that you use the entire piece of Wagyu, i.e. it's not ground up into beef. It's really not changed in any way from its original form. And it's because it's so incredibly buttery and has a nice soft bite as you eat it. I remember long ago when I went to a restaurant and got a steak sandwich where the steak hadn't been cut. And while it was an okay cut of steak, I just couldn't bite through that giant hunk in the sandwich. Enter Wagyu. This stuff right here has all the fat in the world, meaning that if I seared this up for you right now and you grabbed it with your hands and bit right in, you'd probably get a really nice clean bite out of it, but not with a regular steak. Now the rest of the Wagyu Katsu sandwich is pretty simple. On the outside, we want perfect squares of Japanese milk bread, which of course we're gonna make ourselves in just a minute. And the Wagyu is very simply fried with some panko breadcrumbs around the edge to give it that nice crispy texture. Having that really soft cloud-like bread on the outside, a nice crunchy, crispy golden brown texture in the middle, and of course your delicate fatty Wagyu in the very center makes for a perfect sandwich. But before I say anything else, do me and my hamster Pesto a huge favor and go down and smack that like button. If you don't hit that like button, Pesto's never gonna eat Wagyu again in his life. I'm just kidding. But now that you've done that, let's get cooking. Now, I know I showed you this piece of Wagyu right here, and this is an A5 Takamori strip loin, but today I figured we use something slightly different, an A5 Takamori ribeye, which will allow me to take a nice big square right out of the middle of this thing, making it the same exact perfect size of our bread, which ultimately will end up in a square as well. As always, I'm gonna toss a big thanks to the Wagyu shop for always getting me my top-notch Wagyu straight from Japan. They are the real heroes here. But to start, we're gonna make our nice white Japanese milk bread because this is gonna take us the longest out of any process here. To start, into a small saucepan, we're gonna pour in 1 cup of water, 1 cup of whole milk, and then while whisking, I'm gonna put in 2/3 cup of bread flour. What we're making right now is essentially our tang zong. It's our starter that's gonna get this bread to be really light and fluffy. I'm now gonna turn on my heat to medium-high and continue whisking until it's thickened but still pourable, which will probably take us about 5 minutes or so. Once our starter's nice and well thickened, and like I said, still pourable, we're gonna set this aside and let it come down to room temperature. Now, once we've let that starter rest for a little while, we're gonna go into a stand mixer with about 5 cups of bread flour, 1/2 cup of granulated sugar, about 2 packets of active dry yeast, or if you wanna measure it out, about 2 teaspoons. And last but not least, a little pinch of my salt, which is launching in about 2 weeks. I'll put the link in the pinned comment, but sign up to make sure you don't miss it. Now, we're gonna close this down and turn this on to evenly mix our dry mixture. Now, once that's evenly mixed, we're gonna slowly drizzle in about a cup of warm whole milk, which is gonna be what wakes up the yeast. And then we're gonna crack in 2 eggs, both of course with a one-handed egg crack. After this, we're gonna drizzle in about a cup of that starter that we've made, and then we'll let it mix for a little while. Now, after this has been kneading for about 5 minutes, I'm gonna go ahead and toss in softened cubes from a full stick of butter, or about 8 tablespoons of softened butter. Then we'll slowly let this mix into the dough to give that nice brioche-like buttery texture and flavor. When the dough is finished mixing and is nice and smooth, it'll be a bit sticky and tacky, but that's okay. To start, I'm gonna lube up my hands really, really well. Back down on your fire. Point at the food only. And pull off all of that dough. Then, after I've lubed up my hands as well as the bowl we're gonna put it in, I'm gonna pull out our whole dough ball in 1 neat scoop, smooth it out, and drop it into that bowl. Oh, got a little scrap piece. Eat it. Eat it or you're fired. Now, we're gonna cover it up with a damp kitchen towel and rest it in a nice warm place for about an hour until it's doubled in size. After our dough has been resting for quite some time, I'm gonna lightly flour up my hands and, not surprisingly, give it a spank. You'll see it start to deflate, but it shouldn't deflate all that much. Now, I'm gonna come down in the middle of my cutting board with more flour and gently lift my amazingly soft and airy dough onto the cutting board. Just look at how many beautiful air bubbles we have in here. I can tell right away by the look and the consistency that this is gonna make for an amazing loaf. Now, it's gonna take a bit of eyeballing to know how well it's gonna fit into your bread pan. But either way, first we're gonna give it just a little spray. At this point, I'm gonna use a bench scraper and cut off about 1/3 of my dough. After letting this expand again, this piece here should be the perfect fit. Shape it a few times to get that nice perfect log. And once you're happy, drop it right in. Once it's in there, really try to nestle it in to make sure it fits all those corners, and then cover it again for about a half an hour to let this rise back before we bake. While we wait for the bread to rise a second time, let's start to open up this Wagyu. We don't want to touch this with our hands too much because you have to think of Wagyu like a piece of butter. The more you handle it, the more it's going to start to melt, and we definitely don't want that. Now that I've taken it out, take a closer look at how beautiful this is. Now, normally if we trim this, we'd come right around this piece of fat here and trim off this outer cap and then use this other piece in the middle middle here. So I'm gonna first start by coming across the back of it here, taking a nice clean straight line off. And by the way, take another look at that Wagyu once we've cut into it. It's absolutely stunning, isn't it? Now I'll spin this around and take another nice cut right along the top. Now last but not least, I'll do the very same thing once again, ultimately leaving us with a perfect square of Wagyu. For now, let's rest this back in the fridge so it doesn't melt. Once our bread has been resting for a while and is slightly bulging out of the top here, our last step will be to lightly paint it in some whole milk, which will give us that color and texture that we want on the top. And after that point, we're ready to bake it. Now we'll bake this at 350 Fahrenheit for about 35 to 40 minutes. Now while that bread's baking, we're gonna quickly make our simple sauce. To start, we'll go half tablespoon of soy sauce, a half tablespoon of oyster sauce, 3 tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce, 1 generously sized tablespoon of honey. I always put a little bit more than I'm supposed to. And then 3 tablespoons of homemade ketchup. Stir this all up and keep that paintbrush handy because you're gonna need it momentarily. And finally, our bread has come out of the oven. Given that this is the majority of the work for making what we're doing today, I can promise you right now that if you put in the time to make something as beautiful as this, you are going to feel so great when you watch it come out of the oven and it looks the way that it does. Do me a favor, cut the cameras for a quick second. It's like a facial. Oh my God. Now that we've taken some time to let our bread cool, it's time to ease it out of our loaf pan. And there you have it. A beautiful, stunning loaf of Hokkaido milk bread. We have to take a quick pause because a guy on his motorcycle feels like he needs to wake up the entire earth right now. So we're gonna take a quick second to wait when he's done. You done? He's done. Everybody watching right now, give yourselves 2 pats on the back. You did good work. Before we cut into it, let's listen. It definitely has that beautiful, perfect, airy crust. And when you give it a tap, especially on the sides, notice how it sounds very, very hollow. I don't really use bread knives, so I'm gonna try to cleanly cut right down the middle, going smoothly back and forth to get a nice, clean cut. And just like that, you can see that we've nailed a gorgeous, gorgeous bread. Just look up close there at how nice all those air bubbles are. Look at that beautiful golden brown texture that we have. But what we're really looking for right now in this is that perfect square we can get out of the middle. So let's cut into it. Now, once we've cut off all these scraps, you see I have a really nice square of bread here. Are you eating the bread?
No.
You're fired. What are you doing? God. And at this point, it's time to toast our bread. We're gonna toast it, but we're gonna start with those Wagyu scraps and let some of their fat slowly melt off into our pan. Once a lot of this fat has melted off, remove all of the meat. Now with our perfect, delicious bread, we'll rest it down in this Wagyu fat and over medium heat, keep a really close eye on it to make sure that it doesn't overcook. We're looking for a perfect golden brown crust on one side of each slice. I also like to try to push down the middle because otherwise it likes to bulge up a little bit and you don't want uneven browning. This is supposed to look just as magnificent as it tastes. Once these are nice and golden brown, and of course have a good crust, I'll lay them gently on my board and lightly paint the tops of each piece so that our glaze seeps into the bread. We're not looking to make anything crazy soggy here, but we really want to let some of that flavor marinate for a bit. Now it's finally time to dredge that Wagyu. So first we create our dredging station. In the middle, I want to have 1 egg, which I'll whisk up into an even mixture. Notice we're using 3 really shallow dishes such that we can easily press down each square of Wagyu. Now we'll take that Wagyu square out of the fridge, which is nice and firm right now and will allow us to actually work with it and keep that nice square shape. To start, I'm going to press it down on my first dredging dish and hit it with just a little bit of salt, making sure to get both sides as well as all the edges. And then we'll dust on just a little bit of flour, which essentially will give us something to adhere the egg to, which is the second step of our dredging process. Once we're all set with the first stage, we'll then go straight into the egg mixture, dipping it on both sides, again, as well as all the edges. And after just a slight little shake, last but not least, we'll go straight into our panko breadcrumbs, making sure to fully coat it throughout. This right here is the most important part, because those are what's gonna give it its beautiful texture, and this is how we get our katsu. Once it's well dredged just like that, it's ready to fry. Now it's time to fry, but this is gonna be a very quick frying process. We're just waiting until this panko gets golden brown. So in they go. After getting that nice light golden brown color, we're done. I like my Wagyu nice and rare, and you should too. As these start to rest, immediately hit them with a little bit more salt, because that's gonna stick to all our bubbly hot fat. Once our Wagyu is fried, I'm gonna place it onto the toasted side of our sandwich here. Then I'll place on that top slice, and then it's the big decision. Do I cut it this way, or do I cut it this way? I know there's probably gonna be a big debate in the comments, but I'm not gonna make you wait at all, and I'm gonna cut right in this way. Now I'm gonna be totally honest with all of you right now. This is a huge moment of truth right here, and I'm sweating a teeny bit. But let's open this up and see how we look. Oh my gosh. I don't even really know what to say right now, other than the fact that we freaking killed it. That right there is a Wagyu Katsu Sando unlike anything I have ever seen before. I've searched the web all over the place, and that looks more appetizing than anything I could possibly dream of. Can I just start by saying, what a day. We made an extraordinarily beautiful Japanese milk bread, which frankly, I don't think could have turned out any better than it did. But more importantly, we made a Wagyu Katsu that could sit up there with the greats. I don't think I talked about this, but original Katsu is a classic Japanese store staple. Normally though, it'd be made with a panko breaded pork cutlet. Also, another cool thing is that if you break down the name Wagyu Katsu Sando, Gyu means beef in Japanese, while Katsu and Sando mean cutlet and sandwich, respectively. So it's just pretty cool to break down that word and see where they all come from. But without further ado, I say I take a big fat bite. What even was that I just did with my hand? Take it. You're fired. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
No, take a big bite out of it right now. Big bite.
Insane is all we need to describe this thing. Perhaps the best word to describe this is buttery. Buttery, but with that Wagyu twist. The whole thing is just so delicate. And honestly, it's really not what I expected it to taste like. In fact, I don't even know what I expected it to taste like. Now, I'm sure there's many variations of Wagyu Katsu Sandos out there, but I will say that I've always loved Katsu in any form. The crunch from that panko gives it an amazing crisp when you bite into it. The bread is quite possibly the best bread I've ever made in this kitchen, or in any kitchen for that matter. And of course, the Wagyu is, well, Wagyu. Now, quickly before I sign off, we are launching this salt extremely soon. And for the start, we can only make so much of it. So check that link below in the pinned comment to make sure that you toss in your email and don't miss our launch. This is my salt company that I worked on for an entire year, and this stuff is seriously top notch. In the meantime, I think I'm gonna give this entire hunk right here to Pesto and see how he handles it. Thanks for watching.